The desert wind was howling that evening, kicking up dust devils across the empty land. Sam Hartwell wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked down at the hole he'd been digging for the past 3 hours. His old bones ached, but he kept going. At 63 years old, this would be his last project. The Arizona sun was setting behind the red rocks, painting the sky orange and purple. Sam had lived in this desert for 40 years, watching thousands of sunsets just like this one. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt final. He threw another shovel full of dirt to the side and paused to catch his breath. The hole was getting deep now, almost 4 feet, deep enough for what he had planned. Sam looked around at his property, or what used to be his property. The bank would own it soon enough. The for sale sign had been up for 3 months now, but nobody wanted to buy a failing ranch in the middle of nowhere. His cattle were gone. Sold off piece by piece over the last year just to pay the bills. The barn stood empty except for a few rusty tools and some old hay bales. The house was just a small trailer that had seen better days. Paint peeling off the sides, screens torn. Steps that creaked every time you walked on them. Sam had bought this place when he was young and full of dreams. He was going to raise the best cattle in Arizona. He was going to build a real house for his wife, Betty. They were going to have kids running around, maybe grandkids someday. But life had other plans. Betty died 15 years ago. Cancer took her slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but memories and medical bills. They never had children. Not for lack of trying, but sometimes things just don't work out the way you hope. After Betty passed, Sam just kept to himself. He stopped talking to neighbors. Stopped going to town except when he absolutely had to. The nearest person lived 20 miles away anyway, so it wasn't hard to avoid people. He liked it that way. People just reminded him of what he'd lost. But last month, the doctor gave him news that changed everything. The same disease that took Betty was now growing inside him. Stage 4, the doctor said. Maybe 6 months if he was lucky. Sam didn't feel very lucky. He could fight it. The doctor explained all the treatments they could try. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. Months of being sick, losing his hair, throwing up every day. And for what? To maybe live another year or 2 in a hospital bed? Sam made his choice. He wasn't going to spend his last days suffering in some sterile room with machines beeping around him. He was going to die on his own land, on his own terms. That's why he was digging tonight. Tomorrow, he would take his old hunting rifle and end this story the way he wanted it to end. Clean and simple. No fuss, no medical bills for nobody to worry about. The bank could deal with cleaning up the mess. The shovel hit something hard. Probably a rock. Sam bent down and felt around in the dirt. Sure enough, a big chunk of sandstone was blocking his way. He worked at it for 10 minutes, loosening the dirt around it until he could finally pull it free. He was breathing hard now. His chest felt tight, and his hands were shaking a little. Maybe it was the cancer, or maybe it was just the work. Either way, he needed a break. Sam climbed out of the hole and sat down on an old bucket he'd brought out from the barn. He pulled a water bottle from his back pocket and took a long drink. The water was warm, but it felt good on his dry throat. The desert was getting dark now. Soon it would be cold. That's how it was out here, blazing hot during the day, freezing cold at night. Sam had learned to dress in layers, even in summer. He'd learned a lot of things about desert living over the years. Too bad there was nobody to pass that knowledge on to. He was about to get back to digging when he heard something strange. At first he thought it was just the wind playing tricks on him. But then he heard it again. Voices, children's voices. Sam stood up and looked around. There was nothing but empty desert in every direction. The nearest road was 2 miles away. Kids didn't just wander around out here. It was dangerous. There were rattlesnakes, scorpions, coyotes. Plus, it was easy to get lost. People died out here every year, usually hikers who didn't know what they were doing. But there it was again. Definitely voices. And they were getting closer. Sam squinted into the growing darkness. At first, he didn't see anything. Then, like ghosts appearing out of nowhere, he saw them. 5 small figures walking across his land. Coming from the direction of the old cattle trail. As they got closer, Sam could see they were children, young girls by the look of them. The oldest one looked to be maybe 14 or 15. The youngest couldn't have been more than 8 years old. They were all carrying bundles of clothes or blankets, walking in a straight line like they knew exactly where they were going. Sam's first thought was to hide. He didn't want to deal with people, especially not children. Kids meant questions. Parents, police, social workers. All the things Sam had been avoiding for years, but something stopped him from running back to his trailer. Maybe it was the way they were walking, slow and tired, like they'd been traveling for a long time. Or maybe it was how small they looked against the big empty desert. The oldest girl saw him first. She raised her hand and waved, then said something. To the others? They all stopped walking and stood there looking at him. Sam didn't know what to do. He just stood there holding his shovel, probably looking like some crazy old man who'd lost his mind. Which wasn't far from the truth, he supposed. The oldest girl took a few steps forward. She had long dark hair and was wearing a dirty t-shirt and jeans that were too big for her. Her face was streaked with dust, but her eyes were bright and alert. "Mister," she called out, her voice carrying across the desert air. "We need help. We've been walking for 3 days. 3 days. In the desert?" Sam couldn't believe it. These kids should be dead. The fact that they were still standing, still talking, was nothing short of a miracle. "Where did you come from?" Sam called back, his voice rusty from not using it much. "Nevada," the girl answered. "We escaped from a bad place. We're looking for somewhere safe to stay." Escaped. That word hit Sam like a punch to the gut. These weren't just lost kids on a camping trip. They were runaways, which meant they were in real trouble, and now they were his problem. Sam looked at the hole he'd been digging, then back at the 5 small faces watching him hopefully. For the first time in months, his plan for tomorrow didn't seem as clear as it had an hour ago. The desert wind picked up again, colder now that the sun was completely gone. The youngest girl shivered and moved closer to her sisters. They all looked so tired, so hungry, so completely lost. Sam Hartwell had been planning to end his story tonight. Instead, it looked like a whole new chapter was about to begin. Sam stood there for what felt like forever, just staring at these 5 kids who had appeared out of nowhere. His mind was racing. Every logical part of him said to send them away. Tell them to go find the main road, call the police, let someone else deal with this mess, but looking at their faces in the dim light, he couldn't do it. The youngest one was swaying on her feet like she might fall over any second. They all looked like they hadn't eaten a real meal in days. "Come on, then," Sam heard himself saying, surprising even himself. "Can't have you standing out here in the cold." The oldest girl's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, mister. We won't be any trouble, I promise." As they walked toward his trailer, Sam noticed how the girls stayed close together. The older ones kept the little ones in the middle, like they were protecting them. It reminded him of how cattle moved when they sensed danger. His trailer felt impossibly small with 6 people in it. Sam had lived alone for so long that he'd forgotten how much space other people took up. The girls stood near the door, unsure of where to go or what to do. "Sit down, I guess," Sam said, gesturing toward his old couch and kitchen chairs. "You hungry?" The youngest girl nodded so fast her whole body moved with it. The others tried to act like they weren't starving, but Sam could see it in their eyes. He opened his cabinets and looked at what he had. Some canned beans, a loaf of bread that was only a day old, peanut butter, crackers. Not much, but it would have to do. He'd been eating light anyway, saving money and not having much appetite since his diagnosis. While he heated up the beans on his old stove, the oldest girl spoke up. "My name is Maria. These are my sisters." She pointed to each one as she said their names. The twins were Rosa and Carmen, both 12 years old and identical except for a small scar on Rosa's chin. Sophia was 10, with curly hair that stuck out in all directions. And the little one was Elena, 8 years old, with the biggest brown eyes Sam had ever seen. "We've been walking since Monday," Maria continued. "We left the group home in Nevada. Because bad things were happening there." Sam didn't ask what kind of bad things. He could guess, and he didn't want to know the details. Some stories were too heavy to carry. Our parents died 2 years ago, Maria said quietly. Car accident. We got split up at first, but then they put us all together at this place in Henderson. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they found us a good family. But nobody wanted all 5 of us, Rosa added, speaking for the first time. They said we were too many. People only wanted the little ones, or maybe just 1 or 2. Sam ladled the hot beans into bowls and set them on his small kitchen table. The girls didn't wait to be told twice. They dug in like they hadn't seen food in a week, which Sam realized might not be far from the truth. Slow down, he said, not unkindly. You'll make yourself sick eating that fast. Elena looked up at him with bean juice on her chin. This is really good, mister, thank you. Something twisted in Sam's chest. When was the last time someone had thanked him for anything? When was the last time he'd done something worth being thanked for? How did you end up way out here? He asked. This place isn't exactly on any map. We followed the old cattle trails, Sophia said between bites. Maria found them on a map at the library before we left. She said they would lead us away from the roads where people might be looking for us. Smart kid, Sam thought. Those old trails were barely visible anymore, used decades ago when ranchers moved cattle between pastures. Most people didn't even know they existed. We slept under bridges and drank water from cattle tanks, Carmen said. Sophia showed us which cactus you can eat if you're really hungry. You ate cactus? Sam asked, impressed despite himself. Just the pads from prickly pear, Sophia said proudly. You have to burn off all the spines first, and they taste terrible, but they won't kill you. Where did you learn that? I read a lot of books about survival, Sophia said. I always thought it would be useful someday. Guess I was right, Sam shook his head. These kids had walked through 60 miles of desert, living off cactus and puddle water, and here they were sitting at his table like it was no big deal. What's your plan now? He asked Maria, who seemed to be the one making decisions for the group. We don't really have one, she admitted. We just knew we had to get away from that place. The man who ran it ... he hurt kids. And when we tried to tell the social workers, they said we were lying. So you just decided to walk into the desert? It seemed safer than staying, Maria said simply. After they finished eating, Sam realized he had another problem. Where were these kids going? To sleep? His trailer had one tiny bedroom, barely big enough for his single bed. There was the couch, but it wouldn't fit 5 people. You can have the bedroom, he found himself saying. I'll sleep out here. We can't take your bed, Maria protested. Already decided, Sam said gruffly. Besides, I don't sleep much anyway. That was true. Since his diagnosis, sleep came in short bursts filled with bad dreams. He spent most nights sitting at his kitchen table, staring out the window at the empty desert. The girls gathered their few belongings and crowded into his bedroom. Sam could hear them whispering to each other, probably wondering if they could trust this strange old man who lived in the middle of nowhere. Sam sat on his couch and tried to process what had just happened. A few hours ago, he was digging his own grave. Now he had 5 kids sleeping in his bedroom. Kids who had nowhere else to go. Kids who were depending on him to keep them safe. He looked out his window toward the spot where he'd been digging. The hole was still there, half finished. Tomorrow he would have to decide what to do with it. Fill it in or finish the job he'd started. But tonight, for the first time in months, Sam wasn't thinking about dying. He was thinking about breakfast. What did kids eat for breakfast? He had some eggs from his chickens, but probably not enough. For everyone, maybe pancakes. Did he have enough flour? It was a strange feeling, planning for tomorrow when he'd spent so long planning for the end. Even stranger was the sound coming from his bedroom, soft giggling and whispered conversations. His trailer hadn't heard the sound of children's voices in 40 years. Sam pulled a blanket over himself and closed his eyes. Outside, the desert wind was still howling, but somehow it didn't sound as lonely as it had before. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new decisions to make. But tonight, 5 lost kids had found shelter, And one lost man had found something he didn't even know he was looking for, a reason to keep going. 3 weeks had passed since the girls showed up at Sam's ranch, and his quiet life had turned completely upside down. The trailer that once echoed with silence now buzzed with constant activity. Voices calling out questions, feet running across the floor, and something Sam hadn't heard in years, laughter, every morning started the same way. Elena would wake up first and tiptoe to the kitchen, trying not to wake anyone else. But Sam was always already awake, sitting at his small table with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the desert rocks gold and red. "Good morning, Sam," she would whisper, climbing onto the chair next to him. "Morning, little one," he would whisper back. It had become their special time together. Those quiet moments before the day really began. The other girls would wake up one by one. Maria always checked on everyone else before thinking about herself. The twins, Rosa and Carmen, had to argue about something every morning, whose turn it was to brush their teeth first, who got the last clean shirt, anything really. Sophia would stumble out looking like her hair had been in a fight with a tornado. Breakfast was always an adventure. Sam had learned that feeding 5 kids was like feeding a small army. His dozen chickens, which used to give him more eggs than he knew what to do with, now barely kept up with demand. But the girls didn't complain. They were grateful for everything. "Can we help with the chickens today?" Sophia asked one morning, practically bouncing in her chair. Sam had been hesitant to let them help at first. He wasn't used to having anyone else around, and his few remaining animals were all he had left. But watching Sophia's eager face, he found himself nodding. "I suppose you could help gather eggs," he said. "But you have to be gentle. Chickens don't like loud noises or sudden movements." Sophia's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "I'll be super careful, I promise." That afternoon, Sam found himself teaching all 5 girls how to handle the chickens properly. Elena was scared at first, but Rosa showed her how to move slowly and speak softly. Soon the little girl was giggling as a fat red hen pecked corn from her palm. "This one likes me," Elena announced proudly. "I'm going to call her Rosie." "You can't name them," Carmen said. "Sam might have to dot, you know." She made a cutting motion across her neck. "These are laying hens," Sam explained quickly, seeing Elena's horrified expression. "They're for eggs, not eating. Rosie is safe." Over the following days, the girls found ways to make themselves useful around the property. Maria took charge of organizing everything, creating schedules for chores and making sure everyone did their part. The twins worked together to start a small vegetable garden in a patch of ground behind the trailer. Sophia appointed herself head of chicken care and took the job very seriously, but it was Elena who surprised Sam the most. The little girl had a gift for finding beauty in the harshest places. She collected interesting rocks and arranged them in patterns around the trailer. She painted pictures on cardboard with some old paint she found in the barn, creating colorful artwork that brightened up the dingy walls. "Look, Sam," she said one evening, showing him a picture she'd drawn. "It's our family." Sam stared at the drawing. 6 stick figures standing in front of a small house, all holding hands. A man with gray hair and a beard stood next to 5 girls of different heights. Above them, Elena had drawn a bright yellow sun and the words, "Home Sweet Home," in wobbly letters. "That's really good," Sam said, his voice rougher than usual. "Maybe we should hang it up on the refrigerator," Elena beamed. "Really? Like a real family?" The words hit Sam harder than he expected. A real family. Was that what this was becoming? But even as the days settled into a routine, Sam knew it couldn't last forever. He caught Maria staring down the road sometimes, worry written all over her face. She was the oldest, which meant she understood better than the others that they were living on borrowed time. The reminder came on a Thursday afternoon when a white SUV drove slowly past Sam's property. It didn't stop, but it slowed down enough for the driver to get a good look at the place. Sam watched from his window as the vehicle continued down the road, then turned around and made another pass. "Maria," he called quietly, "come here a minute." She appeared at his side, following his gaze to the road. Her face went pale when she saw the SUV. "Do you think they're looking for us?" she asked. Probably, Sam said honestly. You girls have been missing for almost a month. They're not going to stop looking. That night, after the younger girls had gone to bed, Maria sat with Sam at the kitchen table. She looked older than her 14 years, carrying responsibilities that no kid should have to handle. I know we can't stay here forever, she said quietly, but I don't know what to do. If they find us, they'll split us up for sure, they said. So before, Sam had been thinking about the same thing. He'd grown attached to these kids in a way that surprised him. They'd brought life back to his dying ranch, given him a reason to get up in the morning. But he also knew that an old man with no legal rights and a terminal illness wasn't exactly guardian material. There might be a way, he said slowly, but it would be complicated and expensive. What do you mean? I could try to become your legal guardian, all of you together, but it would mean lawyers, court hearings, background checks, and there's no guarantee it would work. Maria's eyes filled with hope and fear at the same time. Would you really do that for us? Sam looked around his small trailer, imagining what it would be like to go back to the silence and emptiness. Then he thought about Elena's drawings on his refrigerator, Sophia's careful attention to the chickens, the twins' arguments that somehow made him smile. Yeah, he said finally, I think I would. The next morning brought another challenge. Sophia woke up with a fever and couldn't keep any food down. Sam had dealt with sick cattle plenty of times, but a sick child was different. He found himself driving the 40 miles to town at 5 in the morning, something he hadn't done in years. The pharmacist looked at him strangely when he bought children's medicine, but Sam didn't care. He drove back to the ranch going faster than he should have, worried about the little girl who had become like his own granddaughter. Sophia recovered after a few days of rest and medicine, but the experience taught Sam something important. These weren't just kids he was helping temporarily. They had become his responsibility, his family, and families took care of each other no matter what. That evening, as he sat on his front steps watching the girls play a game they'd invented with rocks and sticks, Sam made a decision. Tomorrow he would drive to town again, but this time to see a lawyer. It was time to make this arrangement official before someone else made the decision for them. The hole he'd been digging that first night was completely filled in now, covered over with desert grass that the girls had planted. In its place, Elena had arranged some of her painted rocks in the shape of a heart. Sam smiled, watching his girls laugh and play in the fading desert light. For the first time in 15 years, he was planning for a future instead of an ending. The lawyer's office smelled like old coffee and stress. Sam sat in an uncomfortable chair across from a woman who looked young enough to be his daughter. Her nameplate read Jennifer Walsh, family law attorney, and she had the kind of serious expression that meant expensive problems ahead. Mr. Hartwell, she said, looking over the papers Sam had filled out, I have to be honest with you. What you're asking for is going to be very difficult. You're 63 years old, single, with no experience raising children. And these aren't just any children, they're runaway wards of the state. Sam's jaw tightened. Those girls aren't running from good people, they're running from abuse. I believe you, Jennifer said gently. But proving that in court is another matter entirely. The state of Nevada is going to fight this. They have legal custody and they're going to want those children back. How much? Sam asked bluntly. Jennifer hesitated. For a case this complex? We're looking at maybe $20,000? Maybe more if it goes to trial. Sam felt his heart sink. $20,000 might as well have been $20 million. He had maybe $3,000 in his savings account, and that was supposed to last him until he died. The ranch was mortgaged to the hilt, and his medical bills from Betty's illness had cleaned out everything else. I need some time to think, Sam said, standing up slowly. Mr. Hartwell, Jennifer called as he reached the door. There is one thing. If you can prove abuse at the group home where they lived, that changes everything. It would give us grounds to argue that returning them there would be harmful. Sam drove home feeling defeated. How was he supposed to prove something that happened? In another state? The girls had tried to tell people before, and nobody believed them. When he got back to the ranch, he found the girls working in their vegetable garden. The tomato plants were finally starting to produce, and Rosa was carefully picking the ripe ones. It was such a normal, peaceful scene that Sam almost forgot about the storm clouds gathering around them. "How did it go?" Maria asked quietly, walking over to where Sam stood by his truck. "Could be better," Sam admitted. "Could be worse. But 2 days later, everything changed." Sam was fixing a broken fence post when he saw dust clouds coming up the road. 3 vehicles this time, 2 official-looking cars with government plates and a police cruiser bringing up the rear. "Girls," Sam called out, trying to keep his voice calm. "Come here, please." They all gathered around him, instinctively moving closer together. Elena grabbed Sam's hand and he squeezed it gently. "Remember what we talked about," he said quietly. "Tell the truth. All of it." The cars pulled up in front of the trailer, and several people got out. A woman in a business suit who introduced herself as a social worker from Nevada, a man from Arizona Child Services, and 2 police officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Hartwell," the Nevada social worker said, her voice crisp and official. "I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. We're here to collect 5 minors who were reported missing from our facility." "These kids aren't going anywhere," Sam said firmly. "Sir, you're harboring runaway minors. That's a felony. We can arrest you right now if you don't cooperate." The police officer stepped forward, but then something unexpected happened. Elena let go of Sam's hand and walked right up to the social worker. "Lady," the 8-year-old said in a clear, strong voice, "we're not going back to that bad place. The man there hurt kids, and you didn't believe us when we told you." "Sweetheart," Janet said, crouching down to Elena's level. "Sometimes children misunderstand things that happen to them. Mr. Peterson is a trained professional." "Peterson is a monster," Maria interrupted, stepping forward. "And we can prove it. What happened next changed everything." Maria pulled out a small digital camera that Sam didn't even know she had. It was old and scratched, but it still worked. "I took pictures," Maria said simply, "before we left. Pictures of the bruises on Carmen's back. Pictures of the broken lock on our bedroom door. Pictures of the dirty kitchen where they made us eat moldy food." The adults all stared at the camera like it was a bomb about to explode. Sophia spoke up next, and Rosa wrote down everything in a diary: dates, times, what happened to who. She hid it in her pillowcase. Rosa nodded, reaching into her backpack and pulling out a small notebook. "I wrote it all down because Maria said maybe someday someone would believe us if we had proof." Janet Morrison's confident expression was starting to crack. She looked at the Arizona social worker, who was frowning deeply. "We need to see these photos and this diary," the Arizona officer said. "If there's evidence of abuse, we have to investigate before we can release these children to anyone." "They're not going back," Sam said again, more firmly this time. "Not to that place, not to anyone who won't keep them together." The police officer, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke up. "Ma'am," he said to Janet Morrison, "I think we need to slow this down. If these kids have evidence of abuse, we can't just ignore it." What followed was the longest afternoon of Sam's life. The social workers made phone calls. The police officers interviewed each girl separately. The camera and diary were handed over as evidence. Sam sat on his front steps, watching this bureaucratic storm tear through his peaceful world. But then something amazing happened. One by one, the girls came to sit beside him. First Elena, then Sophia, then the twins, and finally Maria. "Whatever happens," Maria said quietly, "thank you for believing us. Thank you for giving us a real home, even if it was just for a little while." "It's not over yet," Sam said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. 2 hours later, Janet Morrison's phone rang. Sam watched her face go pale as she listened to whoever was on the other end. When she hung up, she looked sick. "There's been an arrest," she announced, "based on the evidence your girls provided and some other complaints that were filed this week. Peterson has been charged with multiple counts of child abuse." The Arizona social worker nodded grimly. "Which means these children cannot be returned to that facility." We'll need to find alternative placement. Together, Sam said quickly. They stay together? Mr. Hartwell, the Arizona officer said, are you prepared to begin the formal process of becoming their legal guardian? Sam thought about the lawyer's fees he couldn't afford. He thought about his cancer diagnosis and uncertain future. He thought about 5 kids who deserved better than the hand life had dealt them. Yes, he said simply, whatever it takes. As the official cars finally drove away, leaving the girls at the ranch pending a court hearing, Elena climbed into Sam's lap. Sam, she said, are we really going to be a family? Sam looked at the 5 faces surrounding him, faces that had become as familiar and precious as his own reflection. Yeah, little one, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I think we really are. That night, Sam called Jennifer Walsh and told her to start the paperwork. He didn't know how he'd pay for it, but somehow he'd find a way. These kids had fought for themselves with nothing but courage and an old camera. The least he could do was fight for them with everything he had left. 2 years had passed since that terrifying day when the social workers came to take the girls away. Sam looked out his kitchen window at the scene that had become as familiar as breathing, his 5 daughters working together in their expanded vegetable garden, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to water the tomatoes. The legal battle had been brutal and expensive, but they'd won. Not easily, and not without help that came from the most unexpected places. After Sam had called Jennifer Walsh that night and told her to start the paperwork, word somehow got around town about the old rancher trying to adopt 5 kids he couldn't afford to keep. The story spread the way stories do in small communities, from the pharmacist to the grocery store clerk, from the diner waitress to the pastor at the little church Sam never attended. 3 weeks later, Sam found an envelope in his mailbox with no return address. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note that simply said, "Every child deserves a chance." More envelopes followed. $20 from the woman who worked at the gas station, $100 from the retired teacher who lived in town, $50 from the mechanic who'd fixed Sam's truck. The biggest surprise came from Harold Peterson, the man who owned the largest ranch in the county. Sam had barely spoken 2 words to the man in 40 years. But Peterson showed up at Sam's door one evening with a check for $10,000. My wife and I never had kids, Peterson said simply. Always regretted it. This seems like a good way to make up for that. But the money was only part of the battle. The real fight happened in courtrooms filled with lawyers, social workers, and judges who had to decide whether an aging rancher with cancer could provide a suitable home for 5 traumatized children. Sam would never forget the day Maria testified. She stood in that courtroom wearing a dress that Jennifer Walsh had bought her, looking small but determined. When the judge asked her why she wanted to stay with Sam, her answer was simple and devastating. Because he's the first adult who ever believed us when we said we were in trouble. And because he loves us even when we're difficult? Sophia had testified too, talking about how Sam taught her to care for animals and gave her responsibilities that made her feel important. Rosa and Carmen spoke about having their own beds for the first time in years and never going hungry. Elena drew another one of her pictures for the judge, the same stick figure family she'd drawn that first week, but more detailed now, with a big house and flowers and a dog they didn't actually have yet. The turning point came when Peterson, the man who'd abused them, was convicted on multiple charges. 3 other children from the group home came forward with similar stories. And suddenly Maria's photos and Rosa's diary weren't just evidence. They were proof of a pattern of abuse that had been ignored for years. The judge's decision was delivered on a cold February morning. Sam sat in the courtroom with all 5 girls, holding Elena's hand while trying not to show how nervous he was. When the judge said the words "permanent guardianship granted," Elena let out a whoop that echoed through the serious courtroom, making even the bailiff smile, but the real celebration came that evening, back at the ranch. Sam had surprised them with a small cake from the grocery store bakery, the first cake any of them had shared in years. As they sat around his small kitchen table, passing around mismatched plates and fighting over who got the biggest piece, Sam felt something he'd forgotten existed. Pure happiness. The changes hadn't stopped with the legal victory. With help from the community fund that had grown around their story, Sam was able to make improvements to the property. They added a small addition to the trailer, just 2 bedrooms and another bathroom, but it felt like a mansion compared to how cramped they'd been before. Maria was thriving in high school now, talking about college and agricultural studies. She'd taken over managing their expanded chicken operation, which now supplied eggs to 2 restaurants in town. The girl who'd once been responsible for keeping her sisters alive in the desert was channeling that same protective energy into planning their future. The twins had discovered they had completely different talents despite looking identical. Rosa was gifted with numbers and helped Sam manage the ranch's finances, something he'd always struggled with. Carmen had green thumbs that could make anything grow, turning their small vegetable patch into a productive garden that fed the family and had extra to sell at the farmer's market. Sophia had become Sam's right hand when it came to fixing things around the ranch. She could diagnose what was wrong with his old truck just by listening to the engine, and she'd repaired more fence posts than Sam could count. She talked constantly about becoming a veterinarian someday. And Elena, bright, artistic Elena, had turned their once dreary trailer into a home filled with color and creativity. Her drawings covered every available wall space, and she'd started making small sculptures from rocks and pieces of wood she found around the property. The local art teacher had told Sam that Elena had real talent, something that should be encouraged. But perhaps the biggest change was in Sam himself. The cancer that was supposed to kill him within 6 months had gone into remission. His doctor said it was unusual but not unheard of. Sometimes, patients responded better to treatment when they had strong reasons to live. Having something to fight for makes all the difference, Dr. Martinez had told him during his last checkup. These girls may have saved your life as much as you saved theirs, Sam believed it. Every morning when he woke up to the sound of 5 young voices arguing about bathroom time, every evening when they gathered around the dinner table sharing stories about their day, every time Elena climbed into his lap to show him her latest drawing, these moments had given him a future he'd never expected to have. The ranch was thriving too. Word had spread about the quality of their eggs and vegetables, and they had a steady stream of customers from town. Sam had even been able to buy back some of his land from the bank. With Maria's help managing the finances, on weekends, the girls' friends from school often came out to visit. The once silent property now echoed with the sounds of teenagers playing games. Working in the garden and learning ranch skills from Sam, he'd become something of a grandfather, figure to half the kids in the county. Elena's latest art project was a big painting on the side of the barn, a desert sunset with their family silhouetted against the orange sky. Sam had watched her work on it for weeks, adding details and colors until it looked almost real enough to step into. "It's beautiful," he told her as they stood back to admire the finished work. "It's our story," Elena said simply. The sad man who found his family in the desert. That evening, as Sam sat on his front steps watching his girls chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, he thought about that night 2 years ago when he'd been digging what he thought would be his grave. That hole was long gone now. Covered by Carmen's prize-winning pumpkin patch, in its place had grown something he'd never imagined possible. A family, a future, and a reason to wake up every morning with gratitude instead of regret. The desert. Wind was blowing again, but it didn't sound lonely anymore. It sounded like home.